So I guess now we can dive the fuck in, right? I think now it's time because this is a dense conversation we had. So decolonization, people. This topic is so important. This topic was not talked about until like 2, 3 years ago. It started being talked about. I feel like, especially in the English teaching thing, in the ELT environment. So like, why did it take such a long time? Let's unpack everything, right? Let's talk about this. I feel like this class I'm going to be sharing my screen more than I usually share. I share in one moment or another, but I think this requires like reading, right? So I am going to present the quotes here so we can discuss. And as I said to people who were here before, I would love for you guys to see the quotes that are here, the concepts that are being brought, and trace parallels to your experiences, to what you're doing, to your questions, to your burning questions and doubts. Okay, so feel free to raise your little hands. So when we talk about decolonizing ELT, we cannot ignore that English, being a global language, is rooted in colonialism. Okay. The only reason why we can get paid teaching English is because some motherfuckers went and invaded countries and raped people and killed people and enslaved people, and then said, okay, our way of communicating is the correct way of communicating. So everyone now is going to do that. So today, we still live that process, right? How many of our students would not like to be learning English because they have like things to do, they're busy, they are oppressed, they're living in a capitalist system, and then they're learning English just because they need to, because there's no other way to do it, because that's the way, that's their ticket into a better life. So we need to acknowledge that that is fucked up, that is extremely fucked up, because then we are erasing local cultures. We're doing a bunch of stuff and we're imposing something on people. So what I'm saying is we're riding the wave off of colonialism, right? So if we're riding that wave and getting paid to ride that wave, let's do it in a way that says fuck our oppressor. Let's do it in a way that empowers people, that empowers the oppressed, instead of reinforcing the things that make them suffer because they don't have the appropriate accent, blah, 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 the things that we will talk about. Okay, so that is very important to talk about there. Linda Tuhi Y. Smith, this is a goddess, okay? She is an educator. She teaches about critical race and indigenous studies at Ontario Institute. She's amazing. These names that I present here, people, I totally recommend you guys like do some research on these people, read more about them, read their books, read their research, because they're awesome. But here it is. Decolonizing education requires us to confront the ways in which education has been used as a tool of colonialism, and to work towards dismantling those structures of power and domination. Okay? So making students realize that the fact that they want to learn English is a tool of colonialism. And then that if they're going to do that, you need to tell them, if we're going to do that, if you're being obliged to do this, then let's do it in a way that is good for you. Let's forget everything that oppresses us in this process. Let's do this in a way that is empowering. And this is a conversation we need to have with students, because they're not aware of this sometimes. They don't necessarily realize that it is oppressive to have to learn English. Of course they feel oppressed, but they're not like, oh fuck British people, fuck Americans. They're like, no, please, I want to sit at their table. I'm a brown little Latino, but can I please sit at their table? Like, that is the vibe. Those B2 first Cambridge exams, those piss me the fuck off, because it's basically people, oppressed people, paying money to institutions so that they could sit at their fucking table. So, it's like, I want to fit in with the mean girls. Like, we are fucking past that. We're in 2023. So no more wanting to sit at the mean girls table. Let's make our own table. Let's sit outside. Let's sit on the fucking ground. Let's feel the grass or some shit, like, that's what I'm talking about when I say decolonizing education. Please feel free to raise your hands anytime you need to make a comment or talk about an experience you have. Okay. Like, I'm on my roll here. And then the effects of colonialism in English teaching, that we need to talk about that, obviously, right? So, as colonized people, we have been taught to reject our own ways of knowing and to embrace the ways of our oppressors. In English classes, this means that we are taught to read and write in ways that prioritize the white Western canon over our own histories and experiences. So, when people start Shakespeare, honestly, what does Shakespeare have to do with my life? Like, fuck Shakespeare. Honestly, like, what the actual fuck, And then there's so many white people that we are taught to read that are said that they're, oh my god, they're so amazing, but they're just white. That's what they is. And then who are the black voices, the indigenous voices, the Asian voices that we are taught to listen to in our society? It's never that, right? So here, Bell Hooks is talking about English teaching in American schools. But we can totally relate this to our own practices, right? So, as teachers, people, we have the responsibility of in our classes exposing our students to material that is not just white people like speaking. Friends, I'm sorry, but friends can fuck me. I'm so tired of seeing Friends being recommended, people. Have you noticed that Friends is six white people? It's just six white people. There's not even a little brown dude. There's not even like a Latino or something. There's not even a Chinese dude. There's nobody. Not even an Indian guy like Big Bang Theory. There's not even that. There's just six white people. And it was literally plagiarized from a black show called Living Single. I don't know if you guys know this, but it was a show with six black people living single in New York with Queen Latifah in it. And then, like, the producer of Friends said that if he could have any show at that time, he would want to have Living Single. And then a few months later, he came up with Friends. And then they put Friends and Living Single to like battle. And then obviously the white people won. So Living Single got canceled. And then Friends became this huge hit. And it's a synonym of learning English. If I had a dime for every time a person said to learn English with friends or that they learned English with friends, like, it's not your fault if you learn English with friends. You are just suffering the effects of colonialism, but realize it now. And like, no, like, you can't even find Living Single to watch on any like streaming platforms. That's how erased black culture is in society, y'all. So in our classes, we are not just showing white people speaking. We are showing people from Africa speaking English, people from the Middle East speaking English, people from Latin communities speaking English, people from Germany, from other places. And we are not able to watch my wife and kids with that Friends English. Exactly. If you learn English on Friends, who you gonna talk to? Really? Like, how does anything that happens on Friends relate to our real life, to the vocabulary we live in, we existed? You know? So I think that it's really important for us to have that that inner debate of like, what are my references of about English? What are my references of people speaking? You know? Exactly. Yeah. Friends is just white people problems. But exactly, like, what are my references? How did I learn English? How is my learning process? How was that influenced by, colonialism? Because then we can start to see then the things that maybe we need to change so that we give that to our students too. Because we can't give to our students something we don't have. We can't be, oh, decolonize yourself, but we are just trabalhada no Friends. Não dá. Não vai rolar. I'm taking, nobody wants to make any observations here, so I'm going. So the role of the student's native language. That's very important to talk about because I feel like people often want to pretend that Portuguese doesn't exist in English classes. And that is extremely toxic for people when you're like, oh, think in English. Come on, people. There's no way to think in English, especially because we don't think in languages. Our brain thinks in electromagnetic impulses and blah, blah, blah. And then it just translates what the concepts we're thinking about into the language we have most readily available. So, shocker, if you have more contact with a language, it's going to come up first when you're translating things into a concept. So if you're really having an immersion and really having English in your life, at one point your repertoire is going to be so big that you're going to be able to, boom, translate the concept into English, right? But you're never going to think in English because you don't even think in Portuguese. So forget that bullshit. But people need their first language to support learning their second when they're adults. Children, no. Like my son Malcolm, he's learning things from zero. So water is this water, this he needs to learn that this is water, and then he learns agua. And right now it's funny because he learned that if nobody understands agua, then he says water. If nobody understands water, he says agua. So it's like, our brains are so intelligent, but like adults are different than children learning. We need to recognize that. So it's okay for students to use Portuguese in classes, to have, especially when they're not at that level yet where they can fluently speak just in English, to like be speaking English and then use some words in Portuguese in the middle, and then you're scaffolding them like, oh, they say, and then I went there to the fazenda and it was so cool. You went to the farm? Yes, teacher, farm. I went to the farm and it was so nice. Pa 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 pa. Because it's okay for them to speak Portuguese sometimes. And, they need to translate things. It's okay to translate things. Of course, they can't use that as a crutch forever. We need to teach them through communication so that they can, gradually become more fluent in it, but we can't erase their native language, right? Decolonization is a process of unlearning and relearning, a process of critical consciousness raising that can empower individuals and communities to resist colonization and reassert their own cultural identities and practices. To me, this means that in our classes, we're also talking about day-to-day things. When we're learning English, we're not just talking about hypothetical things that are happening somewhere else. We're talking about the shit that's happening in Brazil. Why can't we debate the polemics that happen here, the news that happens here, the stuff that's going on in their lives in English? That is, appropriating yourself of that cultural identity that is yours and using it in English. Just like when, I don't know if you guys saw these days that I made a slide about like explaining Brazilian things. Because you ain't going to translate no bloquinho. Fuck off. Bloquinho is bloquinho. You ain't going to translate no pão de queijo to cheese bread. Like, take your colonizing hands off of my pão de queijo. So like, let people be Brazilian in classes. Let people speak about Brazilian things and let their culture be a part of that. Because then we take English from the colonizers and we bring it into our reality. When people are hating on other people that like mix languages all the time, of course, because it's normally a white person, a white rich person that's doing it. But if we think about it, eu tava lá vendo as coisas no meu feed, e tinha muitos likes. Brazilians are always speaking English and they don't realize it. And then it's just like this is being like pushed onto us. So like let's embrace it and make it ours. Fuck it, No comments. Oh, thank you. Hello, Rebecca.
Yes, just to say that in my English, I just say oxi, oxente, because this is part of my life. I was born here in Bahia, Salvador. This is my place. There is no word in English like oxi, oxente. And when I see something that calls my attention, I would go like oxente. And it doesn't matter whether I'm speaking Portuguese or English. This is part of my language, And I try to tell my students, like, no, there is no translation for oxente. Just say it. Eita, vixe, just say it. You need to communicate, And if you're feeling like you need to use this word, just do it. And I think this is what everybody should do. Like in my English, oxi, oxente will always be here with me.
Fuck yes, because then they want to say like, oh my god. Oh my god is like, oh, everybody knows what is oh my god in Brazil. Like even if you don't speak English, oh my god, you know what that is. So why can't oxente be like an oh my god, something that everyone in the world knows? Imagine people in the US saying oxente. What is oxente? It is a vibe. Like, it is a vibe, people. Excuse me, And Julia said something here. Selling America and their language is not globalization, right? If you think, oh, America was colonized by the British, they're also they are also colonizers because they spent years building the American dream lifestyle and marketing that. We learned that in history classes, supposedly, allegedly, right? They spend years fabricating this idea that their way of living is amazing, and then here we have that viralatismo. Everyone wants to go to the US. Everyone thinks that life in the US is better. Everyone they prefer to go and clean toilets in the US than to live here a normal. Everyone dreams of living abroad. It's like, people, like, I know I come from a very privileged place to say that, but life in Brazil here, when you have a decent salary, it is not bad. It is much better than life in the US in many aspects because, like, you know, I'm not even going to start to list things here, but food number one, a lot of holidays number two, but the list goes on and on. Water, like water here is so available. People, y'all don't realize how other countries do not have water, how taking showers is so expensive in other countries, like basic ass shit like that, right? So, like, honestly, people, this place is the bomb. So, when we're talking about accents, right? English classes must challenge the idea that there's only one correct way to use the language and instead encourage students to embrace the diversity of voices and experience that make up our communities. If we're talking just about English in native countries, we have this erasure of the local communities. If we're talking about Portuguese, we have the erasure of local communities because then someone that says "é nós" is so bad. Someone who says "vende-se ovos" is so bad. They should say "vendem-se ovos." What the fuck? You know, that sort of preconceito linguístico existe, you know? So it's like, who decided that these rules that are so complex that people don't have access to because of the systemic lack of education are the only way to go? Like, I always tell the story of how the British accent came to be what it is today. Right? Like, before England had this accent, Shakespeare Shakespeare didn't have that accent. It was like, oh, we went to the water and Harry Potter. That wasn't a thing, right? He spoke like people in the northern United States speak, kind of like edgy, but still like normal, pretty normal. Then when England was invading all the countries and a lot of people were sounding like them, the rich people suddenly decided this cannot be like these poor ass people speaking like us. We need to come up with something to be different. And then English became a non-rhotic language in England. So they stopped pronouncing the R's and other things. So then it became Harry Potter instead of Harry Potter, or that sort of thing. They started saying Potter, and that was just the rich people deciding to have a different accent so they didn't sound like poor people. You can look it up. Look up non-rhoticity in languages. And then if you go to some little towns in England, still, like the countryside, you'll see people speaking like in the US. So that is just accents for you guys. Ways to segregate people, ways to make people feel like they're less than, that they don't fit into a context. So that is why we need to expose our students to different accents and validate their accents, validate the way they speak, because pronunciation is important. Enunciation is important, obviously. You need to understand what you're saying. That's the basic stuff, but like accents are not important. I've seen horrific things working in bilingual schools, like coordination forcing teachers to go to accent reduction classes. I worked with a Venezuelan teacher that she had, I think she was getting her PhD, and then they sent her to a fucking accent reduction course. She is still one of my best friends. She's living in the US today, and she cried every day before and after the accent reduction course. Can you imagine you make a doctor cry because a person is telling them that no, you should pronounce things this way and that way? It's like, people fucking understood what she said. And she was a white lady. Can you imagine what it is for a black person to go through this? So it's like, if we don't start talking about this, how will this ever change? We need to make people feel, what is the name? Like, com vergonha, ashamed of having these types of ideas. Fuck off, right? Luisa?
Yeah, and I mean, we always speak like two, three, four languages, and well, the accent doesn't matter. I speak four fucking languages, guys.
So, like, how will you, like, when you're having a conversation with a native person, you need to remember they're not doing anything special. They're just having a fucking conversation with you. You are speaking in another language. Can they do that? They cannot do that. So that is stuff we need to talk about on our Instagrams, people. This is stuff we need to be talking about. Instead of giving tips, instead of teaching words, we should be talking about what we believe in as educators, and we need to be bringing this awareness to students, because they don't know this stuff. Someone needs to tell them, and then when we are those people that tell them, that they respect us so much more, they see more authority in us. That is because we're bringing something forward that they maybe didn't have the opportunity to think about yet. Yes, Rebecca?
And also when someone from the US, someone from, I don't know, a native English speaker come to Brazil and say, oh, pau de queijo, or Rio de Janeiro, or Brigadeiro, we think this is beautiful. We go like, oh my God, that's so cute. He's speaking Portuguese. That's so cute. I love this, you know? But when we are trying to speak a second language, we judge ourselves so much. This is crazy. I always talk to my students. The accent means that we speak two languages. And this is the most beautiful thing ever. You can speak two languages. This is why you have an accent. This must be celebrated. This is actually amazing. So I always try to talk to my students in this way so they can feel more comfortable about their accent. But this is always a concern here in Brazil. Always. Really, I really don't understand why anymore. I understand why, of
Yeah.
course, it's clear, but I really would like this to change.
Yes. And when we talk about it, maybe we change it when we talk about it, like we slowly change things. Like a drop of water in the ocean is still a part of the ocean, I would say, right? So we need to have these conversations because that is it, like honestly. And there's something else that you said that I wanted to bring in, but oh, Jacquin, fucking Jacquin from MasterChef. Oh my God, that pisses me the fuck off. Can you understand? If you compare all the seasons, his Portuguese is getting worse. I don't know how he's doing it. I don't know how. I would love to understand how he's living in 10 years in Brazil. He has a Brazilian wife. He has Brazilian kids, and his Portuguese is getting worse. But people celebrate him. People love him. People think he's the cutest thing ever. People think he's the bomb. But can you see the strength of white colonialism? That pisses me the fuck off, people. Like, and then people ride that wave. He doesn't lose his accent because he doesn't, then he's not going to be special anymore. And that was exactly Gringo Image sells. And that was, people ask me, why don't you have an accent when you speak in Portuguese? It's because I worked hard to get rid of that privilege. Because I felt so fucking awful when I had that arrow on my back, like, hello, gringa, hello. I got discounts at things. Like, this is very white people problems that I'm complaining about now, right? But like, people were treating me like I was the fucking, best thing in the world. And that is ridiculous because often, like, I'm not saying this is my case, please. I was brought here. I didn't come here by choice. But whenever I see an adult person that is alone and came to Brazil just from a native speaking country, they're probably fuck ups in their own countries and they couldn't do anything else there. So they came here because here they will be gods. Like most gringos here in Brazil are shit. They really are. Like, they are fucking shit. They're horrible people sometimes because they're just like, especially the lone ones, the lonesome guys, the creepy ass ones. Oh my God, I've matched with some on Tinder that is just like, Jesus fucking Christ, what a nightmare. These.
No, I was just gonna talk about Jacan. He makes money out of his terrible Portuguese. It's just the same. Like, it's unreal. Yeah, he makes more money. Like, I think I saw an advertisement on TV, and they were talking about these specific words that he says wrong, and he was like making fucking much more money out of it. So that was just this comment.
He has a
The
fucking spice
privilege.
line called Tompejo.
Yeah.
There's a spice line called Tompejo.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, like, fuck off, right? And then I think our students need to understand that, like, if you are an authority, also you will be respected regardless of your accent. Because that's what some of my students have noticed. Like, they're boss ass ladies working these awesome jobs in big companies, and they were so insecure. But once they started using their English for real and not caring about things, and the more I was brainwashing them of like stopping that, that insecurity, and they started putting themselves out there, they noticed that they were fucking good at their job. So people in Germany and the US and England, they needed to talk to them because they were the only person that could solve the problem. So like, I don't care if you have an accent, just solve my problem because I know you're the only one who can help me. So be a badass bitch in whatever you're doing, and people will respect you regardless of your accent, regardless of if you make some mistakes. Just be focused on being really good at your job. So whenever a student has a presentation, say focus on what you're going to say, not how you're going to say it, not in what language. If you know your shit, tell me, what is it? Help them understand what they're communicating. Ask them questions about their job so they're ready to talk about that. And regardless of their accents, of their little mistakes, make themselves be understood, because that's what it's all about, right? Okay, next thing, post-method teaching. There's this teacher that's really awesome on Instagram. She's called Marina Grilli. And she is one of the other people that I know that talks about this. She talks about it in a broader sense because she talks to teachers of all languages. She doesn't talk about English specifically. But still, she's a doctor. She's getting her doctorate. So mad respect, even though like she's white. So I saw it. I was like, nah, should I trust this person talking about decolonization from a white perspective? But she knows her shit. She knows what she's talking about. I suppose so far. Right? But post-method teaching. Post-method teaching is acknowledging that all the methods that exist out there were created by white and European or American people. You know, like all the methods you can think about, audiolingual, whatever the hell, all of them are created by people that don't understand our struggles here. People that don't know our reality, people that don't know our struggles and all of that. And so post-method teaching is about saying bye-bye raggedy old methods and doing your own thing, doing something that's specific to your geographical position. So when someone asks you, oh, what method do you use for teaching? You can say you are post-method, because none of them really represent the Brazilian reality, because you choose to adapt the concepts of many methods and fit it into what really works for the student. Because none of these methods truly represent them. None of these methods will make them speak English fluently, because they were all like researchers that have no actual experience in the field, maybe having ideas and saying, oh, the data says that this, and that. But they're not actually teaching the classes. You guys are teaching the classes. So, you know, and then this also talks about, like, in post-method teaching, the biggest thing that we would talk about is like the power dynamics also in classes, right? Like post-method teaching, if you research it, I think it's better to research it in Portuguese because you have more information, I would say, especially because then it's not made by gringos, right? It's made by our people. If you put ensino pós-método, you're going to find a lot of things. You'll see how it's tied to decolonization, right? So they talk about, like, decolonization and post-method teaching talk about changing the power dynamics in education, about how if we think about how education is built, it's very vertical, right? So there's a teacher here and the student is down here, and then they pour knowledge down into their open, like baby birds, you know, and then they just vomit it out into tests. So when we're changing those power dynamics, when we're changing that approach, we are decolonizing our practices, right? We have this quote here by Eve Tuck. Eve Tuck is from New Zealand. She is Maori, and she studies indigenous literature too, and critical race. So she's an awesome researcher. She's an awesome professor. So definitely check out her work. Decolonizing education is not about changing the narrative. It is about changing the power dynamics. So it's not about changing the content, that's only the content we're teaching, but like who is exalted in that content. We're going to teach English. We're going to need to teach English because that is what we aim to get paid for, but we're going to change the power dynamics inside of it, right? So this is not talking about yet of the student-teacher dynamics. This is talking about, like, who are the voices we are amplifying in our classes? About what I said of bringing other voices, like Black people speaking English and Latino people, other people speaking English, and, you know, embracing inside these cultures the minorities, the indigenous cultures. So what are the American indigenous cultures all about? Who are the, that's a hard question, but who are the indigenous people of England. I don't think that exists. That's like long gone, long gone. But maybe, yeah, you understand what I mean, right? What are Black Brits doing? What are Indian Brits doing? You know, it's about changing the power dynamics in the sense of who do we praise, who do we admire. You know, it's like that whole coronation thing that happened last weekend. Like if teachers are talking about that and they're glorifying that moment, I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. De serviço mesmo, assim, de serviço grande para a educação descolonizada, né? Paulo Freire, my boo. Oh my God, I'm Paulo Freire's bitch. Y'all, I will say that a million times. So, like, yes. Decolonizing education is about shifting the focus from individual achievement to collective responsibility and community empowerment. Now, let me tell you that when we talk about epistemology, right, which is like the knowledge education, when we talk about that and white education, white theories of education, we have a very Greco-Roman thing of people sitting in an auditorium and listening to a grand authority, to a person with all the knowledge that will inspire them because they are illuminated individuals, because they are one person with all the knowledge. And then if we go to indigenous, to African societies, I get the chills. Jesus Christ, hold me back. I get the chills because if we go to African societies and African philosophies before colonization, obviously, right? We're talking about Kemet. We're talking about the indigenous societies we have. They have a community-based educational approach. So we sit in a circle, we bring a concept, we talk about it, we practically see things. The elder listens to what the young people has to say, gives feedback, gives input, and all of that. So it's a much more communal vibe than a horizontal power vibe. So when we talk about decolonizing education, we're evoking that. We're talking about like quem ensina aprende, quem aprende ensina. Not I come to class and I have everything to offer to you, and that takes off the pressure, people. Because from the moment that you're not the authority figure in the class anymore, necessarily, you don't need to be the sole, bearer of all the knowledge. Then you can relax and you can exchange in English. You can use English as a tool for communication instead of content that you're teaching. Because when we're talking about teaching in this context here, it can't be about content. It can't be just about teaching English content, English grammar, English words. It needs to be about using English as a tool for communication, as a tool for expression. So when we come to that and we ask people questions and we listen to their answers and we help them elaborate what they're thinking, what they feel, what they live in English, then we're truly empowering them in this English learning process. And we're rejecting that idea, that Greco-Roman thing of lectures and all that, So I think that's really something that we ought to think about, how much am I speaking in my classes versus how much are my students speaking in my classes? Who is this was a lesson I learned in an English school I taught, but it was like a person telling me that I had to make my students repeat the words in the book and read the words in the book, that I should just tell them to read things. But he told me, like, you have to see, because you shouldn't be talking too much in class. The students should be doing all the talking. But he meant about using a book. I would still use those words, but not about books. Fuck the books. But students should be the ones talking in class the most. We should be asking questions, asking a lot of questions. When we open our mouths, let it be a question. The most things that we say should be questions, asking students things that they can answer in their way within their linguistic abilities, but questions, people. The power of questions. We're going to talk about that more and more, but questions are so powerful. We're going to talk about ways to ask questions that, make things go deeper, because asking questions is an art too, right? And then we go into student agency. Student agency is so important. And we don't even use that term too much here in the Brazilian English speaking community, but I've been having a lot of contact with Australian educators, and they use that word a lot, and I thought it was interesting because it's autonomy. It's the same thing as autonomy. It's similar to autonomy, but agency is, I don't know. I can't really explain how different it is, but it's about having control of the process. It's about, being the protagonist of the process. and managing that well. I think autonomy is a lot more about freedom and the student taking that initiative, but then a student agency is more about the student being given that autonomy and being supported along that way to have that autonomy, because if you just say, tem que ser autônomo, cara, vai aprender inglês, tem que ser de forma autônoma. And then the student's like, okay, but what does that mean? So if we're going to decolonize our practices for real, we need to realize that they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it because they didn't grow up in a system that let them do it, because we're all born natural learners, and then like babies are learning machines, but then slowly we get taught that education is one thing or another, and then we lose that ability to research, to ask questions, to wonder. And that's something we need to help them regain, right? And we do that through asking questions. We'll cover that when we talk about metacognition. But especially this lazy generation, and you understand how it's like TikTok and technology is kind of colonizing our attention too. It's colonizing our cognitive processes because it's kind of addicting our attention spans. It's really like fucking us up how we are getting lazy as a generation. Kids are being exposed to screens from a very young age that is so bad. So like we're working with fucking zombies here. We cannot forget that. And then I think that's one of our biggest things, like having love, acceptance, and provocation towards that. Like I love you, I accept you, I understand your challenges, I understand your routine is hard, but accountability, yo. Because I don't work miracles. Because I can't do things if you're not gonna, meet me halfway. You need to have agency. You need to do your shit because one class per week is not enough. And they need to know that. We need to tell them that. No sugarcoating that shit because they need to know. Yes, Becca?
Yes, I wonder how we can use these tools, and so for example, social medias, TikTok, and how we can use it in our favor. Because I think it is impossible to go against it. It's impossible to go against them. It's like we're gonna lose. It's
Mm-hmm.
impossible, really. So I wonder how we can use this in our favor so we can provide more knowledge, or we can help our student, or we can access our student with this type of knowledge. And I really have no answer. And I would love to hear something, because I don't really know how to do it. I don't know how to use, of course I know how to use Instagram and talk about those things, but I don't know if I can really touch my students in the way that I want to, you know?
Absolutely. That's a big challenge. And you know what I would say? Ask them that question. That's my answer. Ask them that question. I have a class on my spreadsheet. You'll see that's about social media, and it asks all sorts of questions like, how much time do you spend on social media? Nothing prevents us from at the end of that class asking that student, so you said you spend a lot of time on social media. How can we use that in your favor to learn English? Let them answer that question. Why you gotta think of everything? And then that involves decolonization. So instead of you giving them the knowledge, like, hey, follow this person on TikTok, go there and do this on Instagram, you ask them, how you gonna do it? Make their little heads turn, make their little thinking bolts turn. Because why do we, if you want to learn English, if you want to be in contact with English teachers, what do? You do it. You fucking follow people. You follow influencers. You follow, I don't know, you watch things, you listen to podcasts. You are wired to be self-taught. Teachers are always having contact with culture. Well, we can't use the same things that we use on our students because they're different people. So no impositions of like, do this, do that. Ask them instead of imposing. Next time you are going to give a suggestion, before making a suggestion, ask them. And then in the middle of their answers, you can make little suggestions on what they tell you, like make them think that they had the idea. Inception. Autonomy inception, bilingual habits inception. Let them think that they had, ooh, I had the idea. No, you didn't, bitch. I was there scaffolding you every step of the way, but let you think it. Yes, it's better. You'll feel empowered about it. Liz?
I don't know. I was just gonna say, like, when my student, we were like gossiping during class. Like, she was talking about she really loves Justin Bieber, and then there is the Hailey Bieber and Selena Gomez drama. And then I introduced her to the gossip vocabulary, fofoca, and then she sent me like a TikTok or something talking about this. Then I told her, just watch it in English. Okay, so that's something that you like. So I told her I do it sometimes when I want to just vent. I go to this gossip like surreal, unreal YouTube pages, and that's it. So she gets in touch with English and do what she likes, you know. I
Absolutely.
told her to do this, and we gossip together, and she learned. She get in touch with the language, you know.
Absolutely. That is precious because you're not going to build habits from scratch, people. You got to get the things that they're already doing in their lives and put it into the conversation, you know? Like if they like gossip, you're not going to tell them to listen to a podcast about learning English or about, you know, grammar or about marketing or whatever the fuck. You're going to tell them to do what they can do inside their reality, what they're already doing, right? So I always tell them like, "Oh, get your profession and write that in English on Instagram and see the hashtags." Right? So if I work with marketing, I go and I put marketing 101 or marketing strategy. If I work with nursing, if I'm a nurse, then I put hashtag nurse and see what comes up if we have a lot of famous nurses on Instagram. I don't know. Find your people, right? I ask them that sort of thing. Maybe I ask them, "Oh, do you know if there are any famous lawyers on Instagram?" Oh, teacher, never thought about that, right? Yeah, maybe I should follow some lawyers. Yeah, that would be a great idea you had there, right? Louisa, I believe you raised your hand. You want to say something? No? Okay. So, some quotes about student agency here, right? Or decolonization still. A decolonized education empowers students to be co creators of knowledge rather than passive recipients of information. Okay? It's what I've been saying. They shouldn't be just people memorizing things. They shouldn't be the people just, you know, memorizing grammar rules. It's all about making things contextualized. It's all about letting them share their reality and learning from them. Heck, I know a lot of random things because I let my students tell me a lot of random things. Like I know so much. I think I've told you guys this before, but I feel like I'm having a deja vu. But like I know so much about data privacy and protection. I know so much about hacking and I know so much about data engineering and I know so much about cryptocurrency that I don't give a shit. Soccer, people. I know so much fucking things about soccer that like I hate soccer, but I know so much about Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar. Like, oh my God. Because whenever I have a student that likes soccer, I'm like, to God, I do not understand soccer. I play dumb. I'm like, I do not understand soccer. Can you please explain the rules of soccer to me because I have no fucking idea what is going on? And then they get so excited. They're like, and then they tell me all the things and then what are your favorite players, let's find some on YouTube here, and then we watch some highlights of that person, and then I was like, why is this a good pass? Like that made why what is this that he just did? Isn't that illegal from the, you know, I don't give a shit, but then I am asking questions and then it's kind of interesting once I'm in the mood, you know. Once I'm there in class, I think it's interesting. After the class, I'm gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe I spent so much time talking about that. But during the moment, I literally am interested. And now I think maybe I understand soccer. Maybe. After 5 students that were obsessed about soccer, maybe I understand soccer. During the World Cup, I was surprised 'cause I was like, no, foi impedido. And everyone was like, não foi gol. I was like, não foi impedido. Você vai ver, foi impedido. And it was fucking impedido. I was like, see, bitches, I know my soccer now. Thank you, students. And they were so fucking proud of me when I told them that. And that strengthens our rapport. That strengthens our relationship because it's like I teach my teacher. My students are very interesting. Every person is very interesting. I think everyone is interesting because, well, not everyone. That is an overstatement, right? Some people are just like, ugh. But most people have something interesting about them. Even the people, they have something that could be harnessed there and could be used. So when we talk about student-led learning in our next meeting, I think we already have a lot to work with here. We're going to be, I hope to be more practical, to do more idea brainstorming, because this, I feel like, was very dense, was a lot of theory. You guys listened a lot. So, we're going to make it more dynamic. But one more quote for you guys, the last one, I promise. A lot of reading today. To decolonize education, we must move beyond the transmission of knowledge to the cultivation of student agency and autonomy. Basic shit, right? But I wanted to put this here because Dwayne Donald is also a cool guy to learn about, to research, right? But there is no way to empower students without giving them agency, without giving them autonomy. Okay, if you're gonna tell them what to do, they're never gonna do it. And remember last class, I wish Abner was here, for fuck's sake. I wish Abner was here, and I hope he listens to this recording and he sees he should be here, because he was all in the no, but I give my students what's the name, study plans, and I every class I tell them exactly what to do, so they can learn English. Honey, you are barking up the wrong tree. You are coddling them. You are spoon feeding them, and that is not a thing. That is not healthy. That won't teach them. These.
Yeah, about the study plan, I've tried with some students. They don't give a fuck. They don't do anything. And I was like, in the beginning, at first, some years ago, I tried. What about the study plan? Blah blah blah. And never, not one, did anything from the study plan.
No one, no one,
No
no
one,
one.
no one.
No one, really. It's like so rare. Whenever I see a teacher saying, "Oh, my study plans work for my students," I'm like, "Do they really? Are you lying? Or are you just like, do you have like the best student ever? Like, where did you get that student?" Because I think maybe there's one student every 15 years that comes up and they are like that. But I haven't had them thus far. I've been teaching for what, 13 years, and I've never had a student that stuck with the study plan. And there's always like, I hate it when my student comes to class and they are like, "Oh, teacher, nem fiz a lição de casa, hein?" So I've told you guys this before. So that makes absolutely no sense for me. I think that you know it needs to come from them, and then that makes our life easier. Like, we don't need to be providing everything in that class. And then there's something that I didn't put here yet. I think we could cover more, but I also think that if we're going to decolonize things, if we're going to have things more horizontally, that implies and not giving so much attention to the material we're presenting. I see teachers dedicating hours to producing lessons, to making them beautiful, and to blah, blah, blah. Why do we need to entertain people like that? Why do people need to be entertained in that way? Like, did you see my slides are just like words on a fucking color? And that is just it. Sometimes I put one image there just so it's not like too raw. But like, I think it's soothing when you have just one question and you don't have a lot of information. And, maybe I don't even share my screen. I hate sharing my screen, actually, because then, the screen is so big and the students are so small. The more we can use the chat, the more we can, have authentic, real conversations. I think the more students actually learn how to use English in real life, because in real life, ain't no PowerPoints, ain't no slides when you're talking to somebody in English. Peace.
Oh yeah. So Bia, next meeting, are you gonna talk about like the organization of it? Because I struggle with like the organization of it. Like I try to follow a book, but then I got access to your amazing slides, but then I get stuck like to organize myself. Oh, what this student already seen? You have like a tip for me, please?
Absolutely. We will talk more about that next
Okay,
meeting.
okay, sure.
But from now, I will say that maybe we also, because we come from a content idea, a content education, we want to have a curriculum that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. When language learning people, this is something I have to say next meeting, but I'm going to say it now because I can't hold myself. It's like learning English is not a brick by brick situation. Okay, it's not like I learn verb to be and then I learn past participle and then I learn whatever the hell conditionals. It's like many seeds being sown in a garden, and they're being watered constantly, and they're growing all together. Some things are growing stronger than others, some things are more imperfect than others, but then slowly everything starts to, strengthen and to fixate and to improve, because then we can trace things into our initial language development. Like babies, they say things wrong and then eventually they start saying things right before even going to school, because it's just natural for students to have, like, mistakes and to not understand grammar properly. But then the more we make them use things, the more we ask them questions using those structures, the more they know how to use them. So I wouldn't say that I have a class where I only focus on past, and a class that I only focus on future, and a class. If you see all my slides, they normally have questions in the past, present, future, conditionals. I try to use all the different grammar things that students constantly need to learn in all my different questions in all my classes. So then every day they're practicing a little bit of each thing. So you'll see that you don't need to organize yourselves in terms of the grammar as much, but in terms of the topics that you're bringing in, the repertoire. That is the word that we need to remember. It's about repertoire, right? So I had a conversation about technology. Now I have a conversation about social media. Now I have a conversation about food. Then I have a conversation about rent. I don't know. Then I have a conversation about a diet, and that's connected to food. So that's exploring food more, but in a different day, on a different situation. Then after we'd explored that one specific diet, maybe another day I want to explore a scandal that happened on Twitter. And that comes back to technology and social media. So it's like constantly giving people repertoire about topics instead of focusing on the grammar that we're going to teach in classes. So they use all the grammar. We ask them questions with all the things, but then it's just different topics every class. So they get new vocabulary so that they are using the vocabulary they used last time. So when we talked about food, about their favorite foods, maybe they had a vocabulary that they will need when they use in the class about diets. So it's like those seeds are being watered every class. That garden is being watered instead of thinking like, okay, we did this. Because books tend to do that, right? It's like one module we learn this, one module we learn another thing. And in reality, it's like we're learning everything all at once. And then it's getting better and better. We're coaching them on that. So like I noticed that the student has a really hard time with past. So I'm going to ask him more questions using the past. It's not that I'm going to have a whole class where I'm just talking about the past, but I will sneak that in to his plate. Like a kid that we sneak the broccoli in, we don't let them notice that there's broccoli in the spaghetti sauce. There is broccoli in the spaghetti sauce, but you don't need to know it, you know? But then we'll talk about feedback so that that students do have grammatical awareness, because that's a thing, right? But then there is a way to develop that grammatical awareness without necessarily having to each class focus on one thing. So if that kind of starts to answer your question, Liz, about like how to organize yourself, is like
Yes.
you don't need a
Yes,
lot of
100%.
organization. That's the reality. You don't need a lot of organization. I think people will
100%.
crucify me, but you don't need a lot of organization. You
I
just need.
always got blocked on that
You
part.
don't
I
need
was like,
it. You don't
oh my
need
fucking
it.
God.
Like, fuck
Yeah.
that whole structure. People want to make you use a bunch of different shit. No, just different topics. I like opening YouTube, and then I have those random YouTube, things, because I watch a lot of random videos, and then it's like a video about attraction, and then that gives me an idea of, let's talk about attraction with students, and then I go and I start planning a class about attraction. I ask all the questions there are to be asked about attraction. So yes, Edivaldo, better because I'm disorganized. Yes, I am. I have ADHD, so like I'm all over the place. But that isn't wrong. That isn't wrong. It's like indigenous people were having meals every hour or so, right? And then colonizers came and introduced 3 meals a day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's not right, because we need to eat every 3 hours at least, right? So we need a lot of snacks in between. So look at colonization fucking up everything. So we don't need as much organization as the colonizers make us think that we do. You know, certain things do need organization. So organize your spreadsheet where you put your slides or some shit like that. Organize your slides so they look soothing, but you don't need organization in everything. Okay. That is something that not everyone will agree with, I guess, but it's just a lot less stressing if you go from that point, people. You'll see along this journey. But thank you for listening to me. I will be honored to listen to any impressions that you had afterwards in the group. You know, when you're taking your shower and you think about maybe something I said here and you come here later and you share, please do, because I want to listen. I love listening to you guys. Thank you so much for being here and for having this conversation with me. Have a good night.
Bye bye. Thank you
Thank
so
Bye,
much.
you.
guys.
Bye bye,
Yes.
guys.
See you
Bye bye,
tomorrow.
guys.
Good
Likewise. See
night.
you next
Night.
Monday.